for some reason. Hey, Hockey World, how you doing? It's Tuesday, February 3rd, 2015.
I'm Kevin Allen of USA Today Sports.
And I'm Eric Duhacek of the Globe and Mail.
And I am Eklund, and you're watching the Cranky Hockey Writers Show on HockeyBuzz.com. This is the show where Eric, Kevin, and I get together once a week and fix everything. Make this hockey world better for all of us moving into the future. And you know, I just sit here and actually watch them fix everything. But we do it our best we can, and it works pretty well. Having two of the best, most prestigious hockey writers on the planet, it doesn't hurt. So today, what we're trying to come up with a topic for today, and we like to have we like to try to do something that's sort of all the time. Well, we are going to talk a little bit today about stuff that's happening now, too. So we're going to have a little bit of a mixed bag today. But the first thing I wanted to talk about was, you know, we all watched the Super Bowl and the crazy ending of the Super Bowl. And as I'm watching this thing, you know, just from so many perspectives, we all, I think, as writers, we watch sports from many different perspectives, right? You think of how this is going to play out, who's going to respond to this, who's going to answer the questions about this, who's going to be accountable for this, right? How did the fans feel about this? You know, the whole thing just completely was nuts, you know. And just watching this ending that just never should have been, a team, you know, losing the Super Bowl on a play that just made no sense, or percentage-wise made no sense, and you know, one whole fan base winning the Super Bowl because of one. It never hit home harder to me how much the teams win championships on little tiny things. I mean, this is the most obvious that we'd ever, but we've seen it before. Like even in like the second round of the playoffs, some weird bounce will happen. Like my favorite moment was, you know, going back to when the Bruins won the Stanley Cup in Game 7 of the Stanley Cup, Game 7 of the series versus Montreal. They were in overtime, right? Or what? It was a crazy ending. And Zdeno Chara takes a shot, which just happens. Someone happens to be skating through the crease and blocks it. It goes past Price, and then no, I'm sorry, the opposite. I'm sorry. The Montreal Canadiens take a shot. Chara is skating through, hits his skate, blocks it. Bruins go back down and score. It was that close to the Bruins not going on. They go on and win the cup, right? So it's these little tiny things. And it got me thinking about crazy endings. So I wanted to start with crazy endings, and also if you guys thought of any moments that just really sort of maybe no one really thought about as terms of this was a real defining moment. This actually turned everything around in that season, or turned everything around instantly. But it was a tiny play, or a small play, or a bad call, or anything like that. Just these little instances they make sports what they are. They're the drama of it all. They're what Hollywood writers would write if they were writing about it. You know, if they were writing this. This is a Hollywood ending. The Super Bowl was a Hollywood ending, very much so. It was very much a written ending. That's what it felt like. It felt scripted, you know. And of course, some people in Vegas felt it was scripted, but it wasn't scripted. But it felt scripted. It felt as if, okay, that's how we're going to write it, you know, because it was shocking in so many ways. And, you know, like I said yesterday on the show, had both of these fan bases not won the Super Bowl recently, I would have felt worse. But you know, I didn't feel so bad because Seattle people won it last year, and New England won it before that. But man, if Seattle had never won a Super Bowl and they lost it this way, then you would have just completely thrown your hands in the air. But Eric, what are your thoughts on what I'm saying? A lot of stuff, I know, but I just wanted to sort of throw it out.
Well, you know, I mean, let me begin by saying, I mean, the difference between, of course, football and hockey is that football is a more scripted sport. You know, so in the Super Bowl you're alluding to, there was a specific play called by the head coach that most people, when they're lining up, it's like, what? You know, don't you buck Marshawn Lynch into the line 3 times and take your chances like that? And hockey's different. You know, there's an improvisational element to hockey, so that, you know, I mean, both Kevin and I have covered some really crazy endings in the past, but they just come out of nowhere. And I would argue that the craziest ending in sport was a game I covered, which was Edmonton and Calgary in the middle 1980s, when Steve Smith was a rookie goaltender in Game 7 of a series against Calgary, banked the puck off Grant Fuhr's leg, and it went in the net. And I was sitting in the press box at what was called Northlands Coliseum at that time, and we didn't know what happened. We didn't know what happened, and I think it took the referees a second to figure out what happened. And so they showed the replay, and it gradually dawned on people that they had scored an own goal that Calgary, which was this monstrous underdog, was ahead in the game, and the final 8 minutes or so, or whatever it was this unbelievably skittish Edmonton team that had, the last 2 years had won the Stanley Cup, looked like they were going to win 5, 6, 7 in a row, looked completely unstoppable. I'll argue that that maybe they're the best team that they ever had, and I think by the nature of the goal and the circumstances of it, they couldn't play anymore. And Calgary ended up winning the game, eliminating Edmonton. It was the biggest development in the Battle of Alberta. It's what turned it into one of the great rivalries in professional sport. And then Calgary ended up going to the Stanley Cup final and lost to Montreal in Patrick Roy's rookie season. So it was stunning. It was everybody sat back there and they didn't know what to make of it. And again, if Calgary had scored a regular goal, just a goal, the Canadian game was tied, they come in, they score a goal, they win the series. It's a great upset. It's a warm and fuzzy story, but it was an own goal in a sport where own goals are pretty uncommon, or if they are, it goes off the skate of a defenseman and deflects in. This was an Edmonton player passing it into his own net. And
what's incredible about
that was in 1986, and almost 30 years have passed, and I would rank that as my weirdest ending that I've ever seen. And I can't imagine what would have to happen to top that. In my writing career, I don't expect to see anything more bizarre than that in the game of professional ice hockey.
I mean, this goal has been this goal is bigger than the goal itself. It's bigger than the game itself. It turned into like a defining thing for the next. I mean, everybody remembers watching it. I watched it on TV, and it became a defining thing when you played hockey and someone scored into their own net. It became like, oh, it was a Steve Smith goal. It actually took over another level.
It became part of the vernacular, exactly. Yeah.
Which is incredible, for something like that to take on that level. And, I'm sure that plenty of articles have been written about Steve's. It's kind of like the Bill Buckner moment, right? That's what it really felt like. The closest thing is the baseball Bill Buckner moment, right, where he lets the ball go through his legs. But yeah, I mean, that Steve Smith thing became so defining. And I know you probably have you yourself probably have interviewed Steve Smith about this goal, Eric.
Well, Steve Smith ended up being an assistant player with Calgary and an assistant coach with Calgary, and somebody I got to know very well, somebody who I quite like. And first of all, at the end of that game in the Oilers dressing room, Steve Smith, a rookie, is sitting there to explain it, and a lot of his teammates were nowhere to be found, and he was basically left alone in the beginning to explain what happened, and he fell on the sword. He did it in an admirable fashion. I mean, he was an absolute stand-up guy from the moment that it happened, and he was an absolute stand-up guy for the rest of his career because it dogged him. And there are players that there'll be the much smaller slights that they never want to talk about, and he was just. He got it, and he was a rookie on that team that was not a high draft choice and ended up forging a really good National Hockey League career. And I hope that people will remember that. I mean, they won't because it was that defining moment, but that could have crushed him. That could have ended his career. Psychologically, that might have just destroyed a lesser player. But this is a tough-minded guy who was one of the fittest players of his generation, and he didn't let it beat him. He went out and played hockey for a long time after that and had a great career and is an assistant coach in the National Hockey League right now. So yeah, I've talked to Steve a lot about it over the years, and the sort of, I don't know, dignity is the word that comes to mind that he has when he handles this is it's remarkable, and and I think that it speaks to his character as a guy and how he was able to overcome it.
Kevin, what are your thoughts on this goal? I mean, this was
Well, yeah, I mean, that was what immediately came to mind when we sent this out as a possible topic of discussion. And to me, my memories of it are, it interrupted what could have been a 5-year run for the Oilers. If you remember that game, the Oilers had been down. In fact, just a minute before, Vernon had made a really good save. I kind of looked like it was going to be an Oilers goal. I think it was Vernon. Vernon was in that, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's why it was so important. Like it was one of those things where had they won that game, they would have been 5 in a row as opposed to 2 missing one and then 2 more. And it was I think it was Steve Smith's birthday that day, as I recall. and he was a rookie. And if you look at the video highlight of it, like he throws himself on the ice. Like it's almost as if he knew that this goal was going to haunt him the rest of his career, and it did. Like he was a very successful, highly respected, desirable player. And when he went to Chicago, I remember they talked about it when he was in Chicago. Like he just could never escape it, and he had a really good career. But to me, that even though I came up with that too, when we talked about the Super Bowl moments, it's not the same because that was just an accidental play. The Seattle situation is they made a play call that cost them, that turned out to be disastrous. And as Eric alluded to, it's just the nature of the sport. To me, the closest thing I could come up with, because it was a decision, would be Marty McSorley in 1993. And in '93, in Game 2 of the Stanley Cup Final, late in the game, Jacques Demers decides to call for a measurement of Marty McSorley's stick, and of course, it's illegal. And there's a power play, they score, they win the game in overtime, and then Montreal goes on to win that. And there are a lot of people who believe that changed the series. And I guess why I come up with that is because that was Marty's decision to use an illegal stick. And as Eric knows, I mean, one of the unwritten rules is if you're using an illegal stick, you put it away in the third period. That's just one of the rules. Like,
correct.
Not written anywhere in the dressing room. But if you're using an illegal stick, it goes away in the third period. And Marty's did not go away in the third period. And so that was sort of a moment. But, and then in terms of crazy endings, I think still, and it was a fun thing, but I think of, and again, it wasn't anything controversial, but Patrick Kane's goal in Philadelphia
wasn't fun for me, Kevin.
He was the only guy on the ice that knew definitively that the puck was in.
My whole family was at that game, and they were my kids came home crying. Oh my gosh, yes, sorry. Yeah.
I mean, when I think back to that ending of that thing where he's skating like a wild man, down the boards, and everybody's going, "What just happened?" That I think that was just a fun, crazy moment at the end of and because it was a clincher, I'll always remember that. But I'm not sure that we've ever had anything quite like what happened between Seattle and New England. But when I just to make one comment, because we're not obviously NFL writers, but if you looked at it from fate's perspective, like you could say to yourself, yeah, but did Seattle deserve to win that game anyway? Like that catch that was made, like it just landed on him. Okay. The ball just landed on him.
That was
after it was deflected. They had made the play on it. It was an incomplete pass, and the ball tipped, and it landed on him. Did they deserve to win that anyway? On that, I mean, that was just a good break for them on that standpoint. So. Nobody talks about that, but that was when
you're right. And did they deserve to win the week before? I mean, there was a lot. I mean, even that, I mean, they really.
So there was a lot that sort of went into that, but the Steve Smith moment, probably is the most famous, gaffe in Stanley Cup Final history. Not Stanley Cup Final, but in playoff history.
In playoff history, and what's interesting about it is, like you said, Eric, the whole fact that Edmonton was so frazzled by it, and that we've seen it's hard to frazzle an NHL team like that in any situation like that, but that. And the only situation I can remember that is as frazzling to a hockey team as that wasn't in the NHL. But it was Salo in the Winter Olympics in 2002. To me, that was, basically, the moment we all remember, Tommy Salo playing for Sweden, 2002 against Belarus, a long shot from out far. Sweden were the favorite to win the gold medal, correct, at that time?
Yes.
First in the round robin. They
crushed Canada in the preliminary round. You're right. The Swedes were really good in that tournament.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah, they were great, and then and there's a 20-meter goal. Vladimir Kopat was looking at it. Bounced off his mask and into the air, off his back, and and suddenly Sweden couldn't recover. You were at that, Kevin, right?
I was, and it was one of the greatest international games I've ever seen. And what's forgotten about this now, but I'm sure Eric will remember this, the Swedish media really decimated the team afterward in terms of their criticism. I remember one of the newspapers had printed on the front page like almost like mug shots, but they were headshots of all the players and put their salaries, as I recall, underneath, and basically it set them up almost like they were criminals for having lost that game in that regard. Like the amount of shame that they had to feel after that game just because of what the media had done to them was really remarkable. It was a crazy game because you could sense in the game that the longer the Belarus hung around, that they had an opportunity to win this. Like it seems like they had a shot, through it because they were just hanging around. So.
Right, you need that.
Let me tell you about that game. I was at that game too, and just a brief background. Well, first of all, Kevin, the other thing about the headline in the paper, the headline was one word: guilty, with an exclamation point in Swedish, and then it had the mugshot. So it showed all 20 players that were guilty of this monumental loss. So you're right, that's one of the toughest things I've ever seen in journalism. But if you remember, that was quarterfinal day in the 2002 Olympics. And so we had 3 writers there, and there were 4 games to cover. And the last game was the Canada game. And so all of us Canadian writers were going to cover the Canadian game, and then everybody got one of the other games. And it was like I felt like I drew the short straw, because you get the early game. It's Sweden, Belarus. It's like, brother, And so I remember going over to the game with Al Strack, and we're walking in because I think it was a noon start. So we're walking in, and not much is happening in the game, and we're just gonna write this. Sweden wins and advances, and what does it mean for Canada or the United States, whoever they play next? Well, it would have been Canada again. And that was the main reason for going. The idea that Canada had lost in the preliminary round, and they were seeded to play the Swedes if they'd won, and what does that mean? And can they recover from that blasting they got in the first game, and find a way of beating them in the semifinals? And then, as Kevin said, Belarus hung around, and then the goal goes in, and you're 100% right. It was the nature of it. If they there were a lot of goals scored in that game. If that had just been an ordinary goal, I don't think it would have phased the Swedes at all. They could have easily come back. The goaltender that time was Andrei Mezin, little guy. Could have easily given up another goal, but they couldn't play for a while, and the clock ran out of them before they could get their composure back, because you just had the sense on the bench that it wasn't going to be our day. And I think that sometimes happens in the game of hockey, that that this collective feeling, like it's a karmic thing almost as much as anything else. When something weird and strange happens like that, now you're really second-guessing yourself. This was a team that was firing on all cylinders going into this round. They had no reason not to be extremely confident that they couldn't win a medal in these Olympics. And then this weird game unfolds, and then that goal goes in, and all of a sudden, all of the good karma that they'd had, the confidence that they had by, plowing Canada in the first round, gone, and they couldn't get it back. They needed a goal like that of their own, and if they'd done that, if there had been a little bit more time on the clock, like if it had been a 90-minute game, they would have got their composure back, and we wouldn't be talking about this. But it was the nature of it, and isn't that why we watch sports, though? I mean, to me, that's the larger issue here. Why is it that that you can command so many millions for Super Bowl commercials? We have to sit through those Super Bowl commercials because we need to stay to the end to find out what happened. And so but there's no other television program. You can pause other TV programs, it doesn't matter. But professional sport, you need to know the ending, and all you need to do is have a crazy ending like that to make sure that next year's football ratings are going to go through the roof, because everybody is going to be, now what's around the corner. So it's bad for the people that care about Seattle, but it's good for sports in general to have these kinds of bizarre finishes, because that's what makes us tune in.
I agree completely. Kev, go ahead.
Yeah, and that was the second probably greatest miracle in international hockey history. I mean, I don't think that surpassed USA beating the Russians, but this was a huge, huge win for Belarus. And it's really one of my arguments when I make about the the contrived World Cup format that we now have is that you lose decrease the opportunity of having these kind of moments.
Yeah, that's the thing, right?
Because it's just a much bigger deal if Belarus upsets Sweden than if a U-23 a North American team upsets Canada or the U.S. I mean, it's a story, to be sure, and it will be one that we'll all write. But, there's some romance associated with Belarus winning. Like, that really is David and Goliath. If a U-23 team beats Canada or the U.S. in the World Cup, we don't know what to make of that. That really isn't David beating Goliath. That's sort of a composite, like a transformer. Kind of being. We don't know what it means. We don't know whether we're for the transformer
or what it means. And I completely agree with you. And it does amaze me because I'm sitting there, and my wife is electrical engineer, PhD, very logical woman, sitting there watching Super Bowl with me, says to me, this is the crazy. She says to me, it's crazy, right? Because she says in football or in any sport, there's so much that they spend so much time on video. They spend so much time doing that she thinks that you don't that this whole thing is almost computerized to the point where nothing crazy can happen. And she says that's what blew her mind. She's like, something like this shouldn't happen based on all of the statistics that everybody has and all the times that they spend in the room to say this is the way that and so often you do get that, okay, this team's gonna run the clock out, with the 2 minutes. It's just, you see all this stuff that just completely baffles the mind. Like, like I was saying, I was yelling that the whole play. I'm like, why the hell aren't the Patriots calling timeout? That kept coming to me. I'm like, what is going on here? It felt as if the Patriots were just letting them win.
And the analysts were talking about letting them walk into the end zone and then maintaining the 50 seconds. Well, I've said that when I write my book on my career, that there's going to be an entire chapter devoted to the unspoken secret of professional sports, which is that luck plays such an incredible role in this. You never want to, coaches say things like you make your own luck and all that kind of stuff. I've never really accepted that. I remember just a few years ago watching a college football bowl game, and it was a 7-7 game. It doesn't even matter who was playing, but there was a muffed punt, and they picked that punt up and went down, and they on the next play and scored. The opposing team did. It was 14-7, and then on the next series, a guy dropped the ball, and they took a close game, and suddenly it was a rout. And I'm sitting there watching that going, if that guy doesn't drop that punt, that team is still confident. They still roll. It could have gone the other way. And, I'm convinced of that, and it sort of cemented this idea that I've had through that, one little play in one game just kind of changes everything. And the same thing, like, how do you explain in that Super Bowl that a guy who hadn't caught a pass all year, who had started the season working for Foot Locker, it suddenly looked like the MVP for the longest time, and then this defensive back who was undrafted, all this scientific approach to drafting now this guy is undrafted, and as you made a good point yesterday, we don't even know for sure that he wasn't in that position because he was moving up to support the run.
That's what I think he was doing.
He thought it was going to be a run. He was running in because he was going to try to get that guy coming to the line. We don't know that, is my point. And suddenly there, he makes the pass. It looks like he had anticipated the play and whatever. So a lot of things happen, and not just in football, but in our game as well, where a deflection off a stick, a player misses one assignment, and everything changes. So those kind of things happen, and that's why it's so entertaining.
Yeah, and I think our sport, and this is the topic for the show, I think, because I got something here. Our sport is. I used to do this blog once in a while on Hockey Buzz called the X Factors, where I would go. The X Factors, basically EK apostrophe S, taken off of the X Factors. But the idea of it was they were 10 things that should have nothing to do with the game that will somehow dictate the game. Like in hockey has these more than any other sport in my mind. There are parts of whether it's certain teams having certain teams on the power play can't score against other teams' penalty killers. Certain goalies just can't play against other teams. there's the momentum swing in hockey. I mean, we rule momentum. I mean, you can take any other sport, and there's no sport, in my mind, that has momentum changes like hockey, and where a team that's not as good can win based on momentum. Just that they can just ride momentum through a victory, like we talk about with Calgary or Belarus, or the Miracle on Ice team, where you can just ride momentum completely. What is it about hockey that does that? Like, how is this sport? And I'm sure soccer people would probably complain that it's the same in soccer. And we definitely saw it in the World Cup that soccer has the same thing. So maybe is it the team and the goal and the way it all, because soccer is a similar setup to hockey. But what is it about this momentum, Eric? I mean, why is momentum so?
Well, I think the difference, like if you want to use football as your comparative, it's the stop and start nature of football vis-a-vis the continuous flow of hockey. Like, what ends up happening? How do you build momentum in a hockey game? You build it with 40-second shifts, and one line over the board, that builds on what the previous line accomplished, and the next line builds on that. And so I think that momentum takes over a bench, so you've got 18 players, only 5 position players on the ice at the same time. But when one team is hemming another team in, that creates energy on the bench for the next guys, and it's a palpable thing. Like it sounds like it isn't something that you should be able to see, but you can feel. Yeah. One bench going up, and you can feel one bench going down. It's one of those things that's hard to quantify, and I think that's part of what Kevin is talking about. I remember the great coach Badger Bob Johnson used to say that he, half a dozen times a year, he would take George Johnson and I, the beat writers, aside and be fuming because a game was decided on a lucky bounce, and he says, and you guys are not prepared to accept that sometimes a game is decided on a lucky bounce. You want analyze. And I said, but that's our job. And he says, yeah, but sometimes there is a reason for it, and sometimes the puck hits the post and it goes in, and sometimes the puck hits the post and it stays out. And he says, there's nothing you can do. It's just luck. It's just luck, and that's a factor in the game. He would say that. He would say luck is a factor in the game. So I think what you're talking about, you list all the things that are factors in the games. Well, one of them is luck. One of them is luck. And sometimes if you're feeling lucky, right, it's like being at the tables in Vegas. Are you feeling lucky? Well, I think that's part of what momentum means. Like you get a lucky goal, all of a sudden, wow, we're feeling lucky. It's going our way. And the other team is like, ooh, we're feeling unlucky. It's not going our way. And they go up and they go down, and away you go. And then as you say, sometimes it can shift. That you build on that for a while, and then maybe the other team has a fourth line shift that hems them in, and their bench goes up, and now yours goes down, and it's like two moving parts all the time. And
there was a great
and again, that's another thing that is really attractive about the product of NHL hockey, that you can have these multiple momentum shifts in the middle of a game, and especially now, it's not like that it wasn't a dead puck era. It used to be, if you let a game after 2 periods, you'd find a way of shutting it down. And now the nature of the beast is that, the teams all through the National Hockey League are coming back all the time, and you have to wait to the end. And that's what makes a good entertainment moment, I think, for people.
So funny you say that, because Ken Hitchcock I had this discussion with him one time about the same exact thing, where he said he's something like in a press conference, well, you make your own breaks. And that is a discussion that I always wondered about. Like, what does that really mean? What is it? And I asked him afterwards, what does make your own breaks mean? And he says, it means we got unlucky.
I mean, that's the phrase. It's a euphemism.
Yeah.
I like to admit that luck plays a role. So they say that good teams find a way to make sure luck is on their side.
Which is impossible.
My wife was a high school coach, and she always used to tell her kids basically don't take over a game to the point where a lucky bounce one way or the other is not going to impact it. That was her. She acknowledged that luck played a role in it. But adding to Eric's story there, the funny part of it is that I'm sure Bob has made that same speech when he's lost 8-1. It was luck that because he could describe a game and make it sound like it was the closest game ever, and then you ask him what the score was, and it was, well, we lost 5-1.
Right.
But it's interesting. I agree with Eric's assessment of that, the continuous play, because when we all watch the NFL, and it's true in soccer as well, because I'm a big soccer fan, I'm always amazed how it's a completely different game in the second half The NFL is two different games. There's the first half and the second half, and the same thing
Right.
is true in soccer as well. What happened in the first half, there's no connection. And, it's like because everybody goes in that short period of time, they've analyzed what happened. Those photographs that we see on the sideline that the quarterbacks are staring at have all been passed around. They've adjusted to whatever it is that the other team is doing, and now we're going to play a different game in the second half. In hockey, you can't do that. Like the coach can a little bit adjust the lines and do that, but the play is continuous. And the other element that I think is, and why I think hockey is such a great sport, is that chemistry plays such an incredible role in our sport compared to the other teams. Like, it really is all man, on the oar.
Yeah.
On the oars. And so the first line group goes out and they don't get anything done, and the fourth line has a great shift. Like that has an incredible impact. Like when the fourth line has a great shift, like it really tends to, and the announcers have figured that as well, because that's one thing you hear all the time. Oh, that was a great shift by the fourth line, because they can sense, just like those of us who have covered the game a long time, that will have an impact. That historically we know that everybody will feed off that because there's such a great feeling of camaraderie in that. I've always been fascinated by, you can sense when the tide is turning in hockey, and you should be able to do that because either you get a goal or you don't.
Yeah, but you can totally
you can sense it, you can feel it because we understand the team chemistry and how it goes, and if that fourth line has had that great shift, that those guys coming over the boards are going to go 112 miles an hour because we've been inspired by that. So it's really
that's a great point, and the fourth line thing has always been funny to me too, because I've noticed that there's one difference, there's one caveat to the fourth line thing. Sometimes you end up with these top players who have dwindled down to your fourth line, like Philadelphia has LeCavier on the fourth line now. In that case, the fourth line, we never hear the fourth line has a great shift, but you'll never hear they had a great shift because people expect LeCavier to play well. It's when those guys who are quote unquote not scrubs, but the guys who are just up on the team and making $700,000 a year just not take over a game. That's when everybody gets excited about the fourth line having a great shift.
Let me say though, as much as I love the fourth line role, and I understand that it's their job to create energy and everything, one of the phrases or quotes I always hate is when a guy says, it's a bonus when I score a goal. No, it's not. It's not a bonus. Your job is to go out and try to score goals. You get paid money. Your job isn't just to create energy. When you go out there, you're supposed to score goals. It's not a bonus. It's not a bonus when you score a goal. I understand the sentiment and I appreciate it, but I would not. If I'm a coach, I am not happy when I read that from my guy that it's a bonus when I score a goal. No,
yeah, right.
So
no, absolutely, I agree with you. And a lot of times you do see these, to Eric's point earlier too, these hockey players trying to, and we know as reporters you have to feel for them sometimes, trying to describe what happened when really it just was bizarre bounce off of three people's legs, and and they sit there and they say, well, yeah, we got to work harder to make that play, and and it's a lot of knows basically. We don't know. But yeah, there's
but I'll say this: I think hockey players tend to be pretty honest about this because there was a crazy game in San Jose last night with Edmonton and San Jose, and Jordan Everly got a couple of goals. And the first was a beautiful move, but the second one was the puck just got there where he was, and there was that room. Now, why did it go in? Because Everly is a guy that can make a play in space, right? And not everybody can make a play in tight quarters the way Jordan Everly can. But in the between periods intermission, the interview that he did, he was pretty dismissive of it. It was sort of like sometimes the puck just comes to you in a scoring position and you're there and you have that. Now he has to finish, and 50% of the guys in the NHL don't have the ability to do that. They wouldn't take the pass cleanly. They wouldn't be able to make the shot as quickly. Somebody would get a stick and deflect it. So he deserves some credit for the play he made. But he is also aware enough and has played long enough to know that that was one of those right place, right time situations, and that's coaching too. You try to teach players to be in the right place at the right time to take advantage of these opportunities as they come up. But I think they all know that basically hockey, especially in the way the shot blocking is in this, it has become a game of pinball. And so, as in the game of pinball, you have to be aware, ready for the opportunity, and then capitalize on it. But you never know if the ball or the puck or whatever is going to pinball here, pinball there, pinball, and now it's on your stick, and now you got to make a play, right? But the awareness that the game has changed in that way, and I think is part of what makes it what it is, and that's the unpredictability of it. That's that's in the same way that a pinball will ricochet around crazily, and then at the point where it slows down, you've got to make a play. That's what the game of hockey is right now. And we could discuss the whole issue of shot blocking and lanes and creating space for yourself, and how to counteract that, and even if it is a good thing. But that is the reality of the game right now. And so the cleverest players are the ones who grasp that concept, and then when the right moment comes, they're able to capitalize and make the play and score a goal that factors in the result.
Yeah, let me add to that, because I completely buy into that, because I guess the point I'm going to because we talked a lot about luck, but sometimes we talk about, okay, a team got a lucky break, the puck bounced out, and the guy was right there to get the puck and drive it in, but I would make the argument that the top players are the players that not only embrace the idea that it is becoming unpredictable, but work to try to sort through the chaos and make a logical projection of where the puck is going to be. Like I know I was talking to Jim Johansson of USA Hockey about Johnny Gaudreau, and he said, in the early years with Johnny Gaudreau, people would say, man, he was lucky to be, at the right place at the right spot. And then we sort of realized that, it's not luck, that he has a sense of anticipation, that he has seen enough hockey, that he has this kind of a sixth sense, that he kind of knows where, the puck always seems to come in this area when this kind of thing happens, that it kind of squirts out, and if I go right here, I'll have a scoring chance. So there is some sort of, you can be a star by having that ability to kind of sort through the chaos and sort of make a logical projection, sort of like when Dominik Hasek, he looked like he was never, it was scattered, like it was all in for. But really, most of his moves were logical projections on what he felt was his highest percentage move in that situation. Like, he has talked about that. It looks like I'm just guessing, but I've determined that if I throw my arm back and do this and do that, that's my best kind of shot. And the best comparison of it, I remember talking to a baseball scout years ago when I was a baseball writer, and he talked about bad hops, and he said the greatest players in his mind are the ones that you can see it. They sense just by following the ball when it's going to take a bad hop. They don't know where it's going, but you can see. He said guys will start to raise their chest up and their hands will come up when they sense that the ball is going to take a bad hop. So it's their experience in those situations that just sort of give them kind of this sixth sense, for lack of a better phrasing, that okay, the ball's going to do this, or in our sport, the puck's going to go here because I've seen it happen. It may not always, but in the majority of times. So that maybe that's the making your own luck.
That is making your own break. That is that. But I definitely think that's what they're sometimes talking about. But then there are other times when we've seen overtimes where how many posts were hit in the overtime last year in the playoffs. I mean, that's the other thing. When when a puck deflects and hits the post, that's not making your own breaks. that's luck, right? But it's luck if you're the goalie who doesn't get scored on.
Well, a great example. The best hockey game played last year in the National Hockey League was Game 7 of the Western Conference Final. This epic series between Chicago and Los Angeles, and it gets down to the 7th game, and Alec Martinez throws it at the net, and it hits Nick Leddy's the shaft of his stick and pops up and eludes Corey Crawford, and it goes in. And you're sitting there, and LA has just won this unbelievable series. And you have to write a story in 5 seconds. And how do you do it? How do you create justice to that moment, and it's just like, you know, I mean, it was luck. It was luck. You know, it could have gone the other way. It was just a lucky bounce, and you know, in some ways, I mean, that's the bad side of it. You know, like luck is interesting, but you know, you wanted that game to end on a cleaner play, because then I just think, yeah, I don't know. To me, I felt really bad for the players on the Chicago side, because it felt like they didn't really do very much wrong. They played so well in that series. They, you know, they were coming off a Stanley Cup, what should have been a Stanley Cup hangover, all those things, and then they lose. And how do you know? It's just a hard thing to take. You know, sometimes if it's your fault, you know, that you know, you issue the mea culpa and away you go. You know, you go into the dressing room afterwards and it's like, what happened there? You know, and then the usual explanations. We should never let it get that far. We could have won in regulation. It's on us. But there has to be, like, when you're deep down honest with yourself, it's like, how did that go in? And why is it that the hockey gods determined that after this epic playoff series, this would be the way it's decided? It's as if the hockey gods were laughing at them. They say, "Ha ha, we have more control over this than you do, and this is what we're going to give you." And you know, LA was happy to take the win. I remember Drew Doughty said, "Let's get the hell out of here." You know, and that's exactly how they felt. They felt that, you know, that this one fell on them, and they just had this momentum, because now that's 3 7-game series that they've won, and including that crazy win over San Jose. And then, you know, again, we're talking about momentum. That's what LA caught. The 2 years that they won the Stanley Cup, they just caught the momentum at the right time. They just look like an average team right now, but they have proven in playoffs past that they can make their own luck, because they have done it so consistently over 11 series over 3 years that, you know, that might be one example of a team that does. It just makes its own luck. So.
They did, except they didn't in the 2 years, in the year between their Stanley Cups.
Right, yeah, you know, but you know what? I covered that series too, and they lost in 6, and I think it was Patrick Kane in double overtime at home that won that game. But Chicago was the better team in that series. They were just the better team, and so at the end of that, you know, you said to yourself, no, this was the just result, because, you know, like, I think most of us believe that the better team should win. That just feels right. And in that particular series, you know, the better team did win. They were just better in that series. LA just didn't have it, you know, for whatever reason.
I guess last year the hockey gods just wanted Nick Leddy to be an Islander, so they ended up.
Well, it could be as simple as that, boy. That's what I said. I remember walking down to the press box, and I said, my prediction, Nick Leddy will never play another game for the Blackhawks again. I think he might have played an exhibition game or 2, but I was pretty sure that with their cap problems and everything else, that he might be a guy that...
that was the unfortunate...
career there.
That's all the time we have. Such a fast show, so much fun. Remember, you can get Eric Duhashik on Globe and Mail, or at eDuhashik. eDuhashik, correct? I always forget. I'm sorry, I forget this.
Yeah, at eDuhashik, correct. Yeah, on Twitter, yes.
On Twitter, and at by Kevin Allen, and you can get Kevin on USA Today, of course. Great stuff yesterday on Kevin's projections about, you know, with 1 month to go to the trade deadline, and I'm sure, Eric, you got to be working on that story as well, right? The trade deadline story.
Well, I'm looking forward to the trade deadline this year, because to me, one of the questions I have is it going to be like last year? You know, because last year's trade deadline was different than the previous 10 years, where the teams that were sellers did not get the prices that they were hoping for. So I'm very interested in knowing what the landscape is going to be like, and if teams are willing to trade first-round picks and an exceptional draft to get the reinforcements that they want, or if it'll be second-round picks and organizational assets. I think it'll be a fascinating run up to the trade deadline, and then a fascinating trade deadline day or day and a half, however long it takes to make all those deals.
Oh, for sure. And you know, my theory on that, before we go, the salary cap has split the trade deadline into 2. You know, the draft and the trade deadline are now 2 equal days as far as trading goes in the NHL, as far as interest goes, and maybe even more exciting at the draft than the trade deadline itself. But yeah, that definitely has changed a lot, and I think last year was the first year where you really saw it, where people were saying, "Oh, we're going to wait for the draft." Some of them did, some of them didn't, but you know, that's how it all played out. But there you go. That's all the time we have.
Well, topic for another show, that's for sure.
Well,
so.
Yeah, we got to do a trade deadline preview show. We'll definitely do that one. That's all the time we have, guys. Remember, without the buzz, it is just hockey. Talk to you soon.